Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our session. We're very happy to have you here. We are encouraging people to just tell us where you're from. Zach, where you are joining us from today?
I am joining us from DataRobot headquarters in Boston, Massachusetts. Massachusetts, sorry.
This is encouraging seeing you at the
Mhm.
office.
Yeah, it's very exciting. There's actually a good group of people who are in today. So I came in for some meetings and to spend some time with the coworkers.
Awesome. So feel free to chat with us and tell us where you're joining us from today. A quick introduction about us. So I'm Natalia Horenstein, a customer-facing data scientist and evangelist here at DataRobot. And together with me, I have Zach. Zach, would you mind to
Hi.
introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm Zach Dean Mayer. I'm our VP of Data Science. I lead a product engineering team, so I build data robots, automated machine learning.
Awesome. So let's talk a bit about March Mania project. Today, this is not our first session. I'm going to recap about what we had last time. But what we're going to do today is basically, after we develop the March Mania brackets and our model, we would like to show you in real life how you will take a model, you will put it into production, all the insights, and actions that you can take on this model for a business perspective, but also on this project, obviously. We will talk a bit about the changes that we did along the way and some of the lessons learned from this project to next year and follow up. And then we're going to see our results, the final four and the winners. So here I wanted to just provide you a quick education on our cycle from data to value in the machine learning and in the AI space. As I mentioned earlier, last time we were talking about the development side. This is usually where you will have people who are creating AI, like data scientists or data engineers, people developing some models. This is what we did last time. Today, what we are going to talk about is how to take these models and move them into production. This is our deployment. Zach, if you can. Awesome. So this is our deployment where we are taking these models and then we can consume the predictions from the models. Eventually, this is the output that you will have in order to forecast, to decide what's going to be the best next action for your business. And in our case, will be to understand who we are predicting on every round to be the winner, who we are predicting to be the overall winner of the tournament. Now, when we are moving a model from development side to production side, there are so many conflicts in that area because these are completely different teams, different technologies, and this is something that we leverage today in DataRobot. We call it MLOps, machine learning operations, which is just best practices and technologies in order to combine both and to apply a faster way to deploy models in order to unlock ROI from a backlog of models. So the situation that we have, if we can go to the next one, this is a real use case scenario in the real life when you have multiple models that you developed with different teams. It's been inefficient machine learning lifecycle, and this is what MLOps is about to address. So let's present the results from our predictions and how exactly we leverage all those technologies. And we are encouraging everyone to write your comments here in the chat, ask some questions about how exactly we've got to the result that we have got, some of the challenges we had along the way. We are encouraging your participations. So here in this layout, we can see the deployment tab. This is like an inventory of all the models that you have in production. And once we develop our model, we put it into production and we created a job, a prediction job. In this case, there was a prediction job into Snowflake. So we can see here on the screen the number of prediction jobs that we run. So every round, we could automatically get the predictions for the next round. As we can see here, this is a screenshot from the Snowflake database where we see the prediction results for one of the rounds. Now, by having those automated jobs, we have full visibility about what we are expecting, and then we can take decisions that can drive us forward. In the next one, what we can see here is the service health. When we have models in productions, we need to make sure that the predictions that we are consuming, the points that consumes those predictions, they are connected well. So we see here the status on every consumption. In this case, I have only one connection into a Snowflake database. So we see that the status is okay. We see how much time it takes to generate those predictions. So we have a very healthy model right now. But if we didn't have, we would get notifications about the status of the model. The next one represents the accuracy of the model. So we have on one hand the predictions and we have the status of the model. But with models, especially in productions, as data is changing, we have the language of model accountability. We always wanted to make sure that the model that we have right now in production is right to the existing data. I can share with you that in COVID, for example, some of the models that has been trained on historical data is not relevant anymore to the existing use cases. So here is a point for us to see the accuracy of the model. And if the accuracy is changing, we can take actions on replacing the model, retrain the model, and additional actions for that.
And if I could just call out on this slide, sorry to interrupt, but there's just something I noticed is very interesting, which is the accuracy of this model. So this is the log loss of the model, and so lower is better. In the first round of the tournament, which is his first prediction here, there's a lot of surprises in that first round. The later rounds had fewer surprises, and actually the teams we see now are four very good teams that I don't think should surprise anyone to see in the Final Four. But it's kind of interesting. This is a somewhat rare case of the model's accuracy is actually improving over time because we had a very surprising first couple days of the tournament this year.
And this project, it's important to mention, it's a very short project, limited of time and infrequent predictions, right? We have only fewer games in every round. So here we see a representation for infrequent predictions. So in real life, you will see better visualization for your accuracy.
Cool. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the process of this model and the results from it. So each week, as each round progressed, we updated our model and we updated our blog on the website. And there are basically two main changes I was making as we went through this process. So the first and probably lesser of the two was updating the point spread. So one of the significant features in the model are the predicted point spreads from gambling websites. And a point spread is a prediction, essentially, a prediction with money behind it about which team is going to win the game. And so I made pretty heavy use of that particular variable in the men's model for predicting which teams would win in the first round. But obviously in the first round, we didn't know who was going to play in the second round. So as each round progressed, I would get new point spread data and then update the prediction data set and then rerun it through the MLOps deployment. And then the second and most important component is as teams lost, I removed them from the simulation. So a prominent example of that is before the tournament started, we had predicted that Gonzaga was the favorite to win. I believe that almost everyone who made a prediction predicted that Gonzaga was the favorite to win, but they did eventually lose. And so our predictions for the winners, once they lost, no longer included that team, which shook up the potential winners quite a bit after that happened. The other interesting thing this year is there was quite a few surprises in terms of lower seeded teams, higher seeded teams beating lower seeded teams. So a good example of that is St. Peter's was the team everyone was talking about. They are a 15 seed that made it to the Elite Eight. But there was also Iowa State and Miami were a 11 seed and 10 seed that went pretty far as well, which surprised a lot of people. And so this year that surprised me as well. I don't think anybody predicted that that particular 15 seed would make it all the way to the Elite Eight. But I would just call out, this isn't the most surprising March Mania tournament I've ever seen. Back in 2011, there's actually an 11 seed that made it all the way to the Final Four. And so I think 2011 still, just by a very small margin, takes the crown for being the wildest year and the most crazy results in terms of upsets and weaker teams going far into the tournament, or expected weaker teams. That said, we still predicted about 70% of the games correctly, which is a fairly good record. So it's definitely better than random guessing. But that said, there were still some surprises, and that happens frequently in real life. Predictions can be as good as you can make them, but especially with something as noisy as the game of basketball, there's always going to be outcomes that you didn't expect. Rare things doesn't mean impossible things.
You know, Zach, it's really gives me, again, the perspective on even with limitation on knowledge in sports or in every industry, you can always create your own machine learning algorithm and get a pretty predictive model. Even with 70% chances, I can still like compete with my friends and my family and be better in brackets than anyone else.
Exactly. Yes. And that's definitely a call here. We start out in the first LinkedIn live session here when we were talking about the tournament. I told a little bit of my background. I know nothing about basketball. I would say when I was a kid, I'd do brackets with my brothers and my dad, and I was basically randomly guessing which teams would win, and I never did that well. And so with the help of a little bit of machine learning, I'm definitely doing a lot better than random guessing. I think of my dad and my two brothers, the tournament's not over yet. But I'm probably going to beat, I think I'll beat probably my two brothers. I think my dad will end up beating me, but we will see. There's still a couple more games to play. And that said, so the final four are up. And in the next games that we see, so I expect that Duke will beat North Carolina. We think there's about a 70% chance that'll happen. And I also think there's about a 67% chance Kansas will beat Villanova. Villanova is a 2 seed. Carolina is an 8 seed. So it looks like Kansas has got a slightly harder game to get into the championship game. So I actually think there's a slightly greater chance that Duke will make it to the championship game than Kansas, just because they're playing a slightly weaker team right now. And then for the women, I predict about a 70% chance that South Carolina will beat Louisville, and about a 65% chance that Stanford will beat Connecticut. South Carolina is the overall favorite in the women's tournament. They're still in it. They're still the favorite to win. Whereas Stanford versus Connecticut, those two teams are fairly evenly matched. And honestly, we shouldn't be surprised to see that game go either way. I expect that'll be a pretty exciting game to watch.
I'm curious, before we're going to present the winners,
Yeah.
Zach, maybe to ask our audience if someone have their own brackets, if you guys can share with us maybe your thoughts on the final four, who you think is going to win. Sometimes we're like biased to specific teams that we really like, or we are deciding on analyzing the situation in a very fairly environment. So very happy to hear some of the comments here.
And while we're on that topic, one call out I want to make is my model's a little more confident on Stanford versus Connecticut. So I went out and I looked at some other analysts like Nate Silver, for example. And there's other people who are predicting that game is going to be much closer, more like a 50-50 kind of a game. And so it's kind of interesting that my model is a little more bullish on Stanford. I see someone in the chat saying, let's go UConn. I think there's a lot of people out there who think UConn has a strong team. Historically, UConn has been one of the strongest teams in women's basketball. I think for almost a decade, they were the number one team in women's basketball. And they're still in the tournament. And even though I don't think they're the favorite to beat Stanford, there's a lot of outcomes where they do beat Stanford. I mean, a 65% chance is nowhere near a certainty. That'll be a really, really interesting game to watch. I see we also on the men's side, we have some Duke fans. I know I have a lot of friends who picked Duke to win their brackets and are very excited to see Duke potentially in the championship game. That said, North Carolina is a strong team. I think Michael Jordan played on North Carolina something like 40 years ago. They won the tournament. So, just because you're favored to win doesn't mean you're guaranteed to win. There's still, they're going to have to play a really good game. I think it's tomorrow to get into the championship. So yeah, we've got another person who picked Duke. I think a lot of the people still paying attention to the tournament picked Duke because they were fairly highly seeded before. I think I had them in the top 10. I don't think I had them in my top 5. But yeah, I had Gonzaga to win, and obviously they ended up losing, which is too bad for me. Go ahead.
What's interesting with the women, I think that UConn, they are the only one who is not like seed 1, which is still very interesting that they got to the finals.
Yes. Yeah. It was almost all 4 1 seeds in the Final Four, which would have been surprising in and of itself. And so it's kind of interesting that the Final Four for the women, I think is it 3-1 seeds. I'm forgetting. I don't have my screen open that I've been watching all day with that. But yeah, so they've outperformed a little bit, and yeah, let's hope they continue to outperform. I love watching them play. But without further ado, so at this stage in the tournament, so we're down to the Final Four. There are 4 teams left. I predict there's about 40% chance that Kansas will win, and about a 35% chance, 36% chance that Duke will win. So Kansas is right now my favorite to win, but I think that's less than even odds. I think there's a lot of outcomes here where Kansas, Duke, or Villanova win. Any of those teams can take it. I don't think North Carolina is going to win. And the reason I don't think they're going to win is North Carolina would have to beat Duke, and then they'd have to beat Kansas. And Duke and Kansas are 2 very strong teams. So North Carolina's just got 2 harder games to play in order to win. Whereas I think Kansas and Duke are a little stronger, and each of them has one weaker team to beat, and then they have to play each other in the championship game potentially. We'll see how it shakes out.
If we can bring back,
say again?
Just another question on the men. I saw a comment here earlier from Nirav who mentioned that he predicted Duke. I'm curious if you did it based on like any algorithm. If you can share with us maybe some of your calculations, we're very happy.
In the chat, I'd be really curious to see that. And then one other call out on the men's side is, again, Gonzaga was my overall favorite to win going into the tournament. But obviously, since they've lost, that's opened it up for all of these other teams that remain. They're a little more likely to win because they no longer have to play the strongest team in D1 basketball this year. I see a question that's asking about location. I actually don't have location in my model as of right now. That is on my to-do list for next year. I've got 2 pieces of data I want to consider. One is how far the teams have to travel to get to the games. I know Nate Silver said in his model that he uses travel distance, and he's found a little bit of signal in that variable. So I'm interested to get some data on that, try it out. And then the other one I wanted to look at is coaching experience. I've heard some hypotheses that more experienced coaches who've coached more games are a little more likely to do well in the tournament, because the tournament can be a little crazy and a little different, and having a cool experienced coach can help you through with that.
Or don't fire your coach a week before the tournament.
Yeah, right. Or that. But then on the women's side, going into the tournament, I believe South Carolina was by far my favorite to win. And they're still my favorite to win. And actually, I think I had Stanford as my second. So I know that I am certain that my top choice. So South Carolina was the favorite going to the tournament, and they're still in it. And I think Stanford was my second favorite going into the tournament coming out of my model, and they're still in it as well. And so again, on the women's side, there's just been fewer surprises. There's 4 very strong teams that are still in it. South Carolina is my favorite to win. They're an exceptional team this year. I think they've got better than 50-50 odds of making it. But that said, Stanford, Connecticut, Louisville, all 3 of those teams are very strong. And depending on who wins in the Final Four, they could give South Carolina a real run for their money, either in the games that are about to happen or in the championship game. So this is by no means a sure thing. Flip a coin. If it comes up heads, South Carolina wins. And if it comes up tails, they don't. And there's a lot of worlds in which you flip a coin and it comes up tails.
I want to mention that the location, it is actually a very good one. And this is what we see in machine learning, right? Sometimes there are those hidden features that might help to the accuracy of a model. Location is definitely one of them, as it drives better confidence to the team who is playing in their home place, getting their crowd. Yeah. So you're exactly on the
right. And there's definitely a home court advantage in basketball. You see that very clearly on both the men's and women's side. What's really interesting to me is basketball data is very, very noisy. You can have a clear, strong team play a clearly weak team, and sometimes they lose. I think the best example of that was, I think it was 2018 when Virginia was a 1 seed and they lost to a 16 seed whose name is escaping me right now. And that was a really big surprise. It was the first time and only time it's ever happened in the men's tournament. And I think that's just an important reminder that, especially in basketball, rare events do happen. And just because you think a team is more likely to win, by no means that they're guaranteed to win. And that's another way of saying, like, in slightly more machine learning oriented terms, basketball data is really interesting because there's a lot of noise and there's not as much signal. There's a fairly high noise to signal ratio in basketball. That's part of what kind of makes it fun to model. But that also means you have to be careful when you're adding new variables to a machine learning model. You want to be very, very cautious about putting too much data into your model and overfitting on past experience. So when you get people saying things to you like, if you have a low seeded team and they win 2 games early in the tournament, they never win their 3rd game, or they always win their 3rd game, or anything like that. Like the finer you have to parse that decision tree of things that happen to get to, if X and Y and Z happen, then the team always wins, the more skeptical you should be of that just being a fluke of chance rather than something that's really the case. And so again, with the home court advantage, that's a very clear binary variable. You're either playing at home or you're not. I guess you're playing at home, you're playing at a neutral location, or you're playing away, you're playing at someone else's home court location.
What do you think about what do you think about the Nirav approach?
Yeah. So I would say talent is the number one variable I use in my model. And talent is fairly easy to measure. You look at who wins games. You look at which teams win games. You look at which teams win games and by how many points they win those games. And then I think the third factor I examine looking at talent is who do you play. So you want teams that win. You want teams that win by a lot of points. And then you want teams that win by a lot of points against other teams who are good basketball teams. It's more impressive to, beat a team like Duke in your regular season than it is to beat a team like, Dartmouth College, where I went, and their D1 basketball team, but they were near the top of the ratings this year. On the other hand, for coaching, I don't have as much good data on that, but I think there's quite a bit that could be used for coaching. And then the final part, chemistry. I got to say, chemistry is hard to measure. If you're an avid basketball fan and you spend the whole season watching games and you really have a solid understanding of that variable in your brain, I totally believe you can make good predictions on it. But I would say for machine learning, chemistry would be something really, really hard to quantify in a way that you could actually use for a model for making predictions. That's much more of a human variable than a machine learning variable.
We have here another question from Joseph about the which data we use.
Yeah, so this is a great question. So in my model, I just use the season averages. I have found for men that any kind of way I try to weight towards more recent games really doesn't help my model that much, which is kind of interesting because there's a theory out there that teams change over the course of the season. But again, basketball data is very noisy, and it can be hard to find that signal in the noise. On the other hand, for the women's data, I do weight the more recent games more highly. It's not a lot, so I would say for the women's data, I use a weight that starts on 1 on the first day of the season and ends at 2 on the last day of the season. So a game at the end of the season counts in my model only for the woman twice as much as a game at the start of the season. So that's not a very aggressive weighting, but on the women's side, at least, I do see a little bit of signal there with more recent games being a little more important in predicting performance.
And for those who are interested on remembering how exactly we develop the model, you have in the description a link to our previous session where we are elaborating a bit more about model development.
And we actually have one other question about chemistry. So using comebacks as a proxy for chemistry, that's really interesting. I would love to model that. The data I currently have just has the box scores. So it has the final score for the games and then some statistics like rebounds, turnovers, assists, stuff like that. So I don't have good historic data on a team overcoming a deficit and coming back to win. I'd really love to get some data like that, because I could definitely believe, a team that has an ability to overcome a deficit and go on to win the game. Perhaps that indicates that they've got what it takes to go far in the tournament. So that'd be an interesting one to explore. But again, in model problems like this, the data you have sometimes limits the approaches that you can take.
Alrighty. So unless there is any other question, please feel free to write it here in the comment. We would like to wrap up the session. It's been a great project and great journey that both Zach and I learned a lot from. We would like to stay in touch with all of you if it's related to some questions on sports or any other industry or overall machine learning, AI. Please feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn, ask us any question that you want. If you do interested on seeing DataRobot, how exactly you can leverage an automated AI and machine learning platform into your business and day-to-day activities, you have here a link, first of all, to request a demo where you can see the platform in action, and also to dig into the Pathfinder, which is a very industry use cases specific. So if you are in industry X or Y and you would like to learn more how we already helped organizations with driving a better ROI and better decision within their organizations, you can definitely find those success stories over there. Zach, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for organizing this. I have a lot of fun modeling basketball data every year. There's a good community out there online of people who just, all these kinds of questions like, is there data out there on comebacks, and can I find some signal in that? And it's a lot of fun. And then of course, both men's and women's basketball, like, it's a fun sport to watch. It's a good time of year if you like watching, college kids play basketball.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. You can read here more in our More Intelligence about the whole process, and we updated through the whole tournament about the predictions, the actuals, and some of the lessons learned. Looking forward to seeing everybody later.
All right. Thank you
so
very
much.
much.